Welcome to the Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you for being with us. Endometriosis is a painful and sometimes debilitating chronic disease in which tissue similar to what grows in the uterine lining grows outside of the uterus. According to the Yale School of Medicine, even though it's one of the most common women's health conditions, affecting 1 in 10 women worldwide, it's one of the most misunderstood and misdiagnosed. It can take between 4 and 11 years for women to receive a correct diagnosis, according to the American Medical Association, and it has no cure. There are a host of other conditions that women navigate that experts say are under-researched and misunderstood, including polycystic ovary syndrome, or PCOS, which is a common hormonal disorder impacting 10 to 13% of women that can lead to irregular or painful periods, weight gain, among other issues. According to the Society for Women's Health Research, almost half of women saw 3 or more clinicians before being diagnosed, and it's estimated that up to 70% of women with PCOS don't know they have it. Both endometriosis and PCOS are associated with fertility changes. Today, we've invited an expert in women's health to help us better understand these conditions and others and learn about why it can be so difficult to receive a diagnosis, as well as what treatment options are available. We're also going to hear directly from patients who will share how these conditions have in some cases completely upended their lives. Joining me in studio, we have Dr. Rachel Pope, an OBGYN and Chief of Female Sexual Health at University Hospitals. Dr. Pope, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
We appreciate it. We also have with us Megan Clark, an endometriosis patient. Megan, thank you for being with us and sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me.
And also Meg Gallagher, who had her thyroid removed twice. Meg, thank you for coming into the show.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Now, if you are listening or watching and you have questions about women's health and hormonal issues, or if you're someone with a story to share, maybe on PCOS, endometriosis, uterine fibroids, or other hormonal health issues, give us a call. That number is 866-578-0903. You can also send us an email at soi@ideastream.org, or you can send us a message on Instagram. We're at The Sound of Ideas. Now, Dr. Pope, I mentioned 2 of the most common hormonal disorders affecting women. So can you talk about the roots of those conditions, starting with endometriosis?
It's challenging to talk about the roots specifically of endometriosis because there's more unknown than there is known. So we know that endometriosis, as you said, affects 1 out of 10 women. We have theories about why and how it actually starts. Some of those theories have to do with blood coming through the fallopian tubes from the uterus during periods. Some of those theories come from the way we are born and the way we are developing. The sad thing is that we actually don't know the mechanisms completely. And I think it's a huge injustice for women that we don't know so much. And basically, we're centuries behind in research and understanding, which really affects our ability to offer treatment and management.
And does the same hold true for PCOS then?
PCOS is similar. We have a little bit more understanding of what is happening, not as much of the why. We see what's happening with the ovaries when women are skipping cycles or not ovulating, and we see these cysts develop at the same time. We see subsequent health issues like diabetes and other risks that we could talk about, like endometrial cancer. But again, the why is really grossly unknown.
Let's talk about another why that's also really frustrating and maybe hard to pin down. These conditions can take years and multiple clinicians to properly diagnose. So why is that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think a lot of women experience uncomfortable periods, but to figure out which one of those women actually have endometriosis or something more like PCOS, it's a little bit more complicated. And so many women who have uncomfortable periods or painful periods will do well with very basic treatment like birth control pills, but the women who have endometriosis might need more than that. And so it takes too many years of trial and error of treatment for women before coming up with the clear diagnosis. We don't have a test for endometriosis. I have patients ask me all the time, can I be tested for endometriosis? Well, our only way of confirming endometriosis is surgery. We don't want to rush people into surgery. There's other risks, right, with surgical interventions. But of course, if a woman is in pain and it's affecting her life, like we see endometriosis does, then it may be warranted. I think it speaks volumes about how we take women's experiences, right? So women's pain for years has been undervalued. Women have been ignored, neglected, kind of told, get on with it. This is your life as a woman. This is what periods are. And I think we have setbacks in medicine because of that too. We're trying to catch up, but we're starting off behind.
So with PCOS then, what about diagnosis for that? And what about the name of PCOS? It seems it's a little bit unclear.
It is unclear, and there's several classifications and criteria for PCOS that continue to change. So, initially people said, all right, this is diagnosed because women are skipping periods and we see these cysts, so then the diagnosis should be based on these cysts being present. But we also see some lab values, some hormones that change too. So people say, okay, let's check the hormone levels and see if that gives us the diagnosis. There are multiple different ways of diagnosing, which has now kind of made the field of gynecology say, well, maybe we should be looking more at the end results, the risks of diabetes, the risks of endometrial cancer, and not worry so much about what the strict criteria are and be able to treat women for what's going on with them and the serious risks that may be at hand.
We have an email in from Marvin, and Marvin asks, is an endocrinologist the best kind of specialist to detect these issues, or would a different specialist be better? Dr. Pope, what do you think about that?
So endocrinology is a great way to start. They definitely are part of this field as well. Gynecologists and endocrinologists work similarly in diagnosing. The treatment might be different because the gynecologist might be the one offering surgery. The gynecologist might be the one who's helping that individual find fertility options. We kind of go into different directions eventually, depending on what that patient's goal is.
Okay. Let's hear from Megan. Megan, thank you very much for being with us and willing to share your story today. And you experienced endometriosis, so tell us about your first symptoms and when they started.
It was from the time I started menstruating. Speaking to what Dr. Pope was saying, I was told, okay, well, this pain is just, quote, part of being a woman. Then it started affecting my life, my school, my participation in sports and social events. I went off to college. I couldn't get to class. I was experiencing bowel symptoms, emotional changes, deep depression, anemia. My stomach would distend, looked like I was pregnant. It affected every aspect of my life. And something said it wasn't right. I was on birth control, and that helped alleviate some of the symptoms, but not fully, as Dr. Pope said. Got married, went off birth control, and started to go through the IVF process. And I said, something's just not right. I need to get this checked out because I want to make sure everything's okay before I commit to what's a very big emotional, financial, biological commitment. So they said, okay, well, let's, do a laparoscopic surgery to take a look and see what's going on there. They found endometriosis. That was the first time I was ever hearing that word.
And how long had it been how many years had passed?
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was 33 when I was diagnosed on my first surgery. Yep.
And this is as you were in the process of going through IVF to try to start a family.
Yeah, I hadn't even gotten my medication. I said, before I even start this, women's intuition, something's not right. If you're feeling, not right, then you should get it checked out. And we always tell, your body tells you when something's not right. And it's kind of ironic that when it comes to women's issues, the pain's just part of being a woman. But with everything else, they say, listen to what your body's telling you. Mm-hmm. So I did, and that's how I got the diagnosis. And then fast forward, by the time they had caught more of it on surgery number 2, I had adenomyosis. There was just nothing left where I could have gotten pregnant. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Dr. Pope, what is an adenomyosis?
Yeah, so adenomyosis is similar to endometriosis, where the endometrial lining is causing the problem. So that lining is that layer of the uterus. If you think of the uterus as a bottle, it's like that inner cavity. And with adenomyosis, that lining is growing into the muscle of the uterus. So with endometriosis, the lining is found outside of the uterus. Adenomyosis, it's within the uterus. So we see it respond similarly to endometriosis with the same kind of pain, but it can be even worse because it can cause more cramping and it can cause very heavy bleeding. Best treatment for women with adenomyosis is typically an IUD that has something to thin the lining, like a levonorgestrel IUD, which obviously doesn't work for someone who wants to get pregnant. And then last case scenario is hysterectomy, which obviously doesn't work for a woman who wants to become pregnant.
Yeah. Megan, so how were you feeling when you received that diagnosis?
You know, it's kind of a double-edged sword. You have a name for it and your pain is validated. That was the first time I was told, hey, this isn't part of being a woman, something's wrong. So you kind of go through this myriad of emotions. You know, there's a sense of kind of mourning for me losing like my teens and my 20s and really the time of your life where you're supposed to be feeling the best. There were so many things I missed out on. I wasn't living, I was existing. And it validated everything. But again, a sense of mourning, but also I feel like I got a lot out of it and a lot back from it because I was feeling better after the surgery. So while parenthood wasn't in my future, I started to feel better. I started to become more active. I started to feel more at home in my body. I had a light and an energy back to me that I didn't in what should have been the best years of my life. So, you know, a lot was taken from me, but a lot was given back. Just took way too long to get there. So this is kind of a cautionary tale. So maybe someone who has a daughter who's not just uncomfortable, but I'm talking debilitating pain, like on the floor, in pain, missing things, going through emotional things. You know, listen to them, tell them their pain is not normal, validate them, and, you know, they may be able to sort of avoid the same prognosis that I had.
And when you say surgery, that surgery for you was a hysterectomy, or did that come later?
Surgery number 2 was a hysterectomy, with the exception of my ovaries because I did not want to go through menopause. I am actually due for a 3rd surgery because it is on my ovaries and actually suspected of coming on my diaphragm and my lungs. Now, what I tell everyone, they often don't know this, endometriosis is a full body disease. There's not an organ that they have not found this on, including the eyes and the brain. So it's a full body disease and it affects every part of the body and what I say is every part of the human spirit.
Wow. Dr. Pope, what Megan is describing there, what she experienced for those years leading up to having the hysterectomy surgery number 2, is that typical? Can you tell us a little bit about the way the symptoms may vary for people with endometriosis?
Yeah, you know, the interesting thing is that we can find women who have just a tiny spot of endometriosis and have terrible pain. And we can find women who have a lot of endometriosis throughout their pelvis and their abdomen, and they don't really have any pain. So we still don't really understand why do some women experience more discomfort, more symptoms than others, and exactly how to approach that. You know, I'm an advocate for women. I'm an advocate for women's research, and this is, you know, a big message to stay today that we need more research in women's health. And we need more funding for that research. We need so much more information, and we can't do that without either government, philanthropic, non-government funding for that kind of work.
We have a listener, Kelly, who has endometriosis and has struggled with infertility and sent in an email. And she said she would often have to take off work one day a month. Megan, you mentioned not being able to make it to class at times. And Kelly had to lay down in the fetal position just days before her wedding due to pain. At the ER, Kelly said she was diagnosed with endometriosis and later had to have surgery to remove stage 4 endometriosis, and talks about how failing to conceive after 2 surgeries was difficult for her and how painful it was struggling with that. She does now have 2 children through IVF, and Kelly writes in, "My endometriosis continues. It got a bit better with no periods from extended breastfeeding and back-to-back pregnancies. Hormones are wild and apparently a medicine in their own right." She writes, "But now I'm not pregnant and not nursing, so I'm on a progesterone-only pill at a high enough dose that it's not covered by insurance as a contraceptive. I don't actually need a contraceptive. That's what endometriosis is for me. I need something to stop the pain. That's what the progesterone is for me. I feel some sharp pain occasionally, but I don't get stuck on the stairs anymore. But most of all, I'm a mom, for which I'm so, so grateful." That's where Kelly's at in her journey. We talked about some of the symptoms you experienced, Megan, for those 20 years before diagnosis. Dr. Pope, Kelly's talking about progesterone as something to manage the pain. Are there other treatments that are available to manage the kind of pain being described here?
Yeah, I mean, birth control pills, contraceptives are the mainstay, but there are high dose progestogens like she's describing that really make a big difference. But many of them will make a woman feel like she's in menopause, which then brings on a whole nother series of side effects and really unpleasant ones. You know, I'm glad that she brought up insurance because insurance is one of the other main barriers to this condition and disease state, really. You know, insurance limits options for treatment. It also limits women's access to subspecialists. So I refer women to specialized surgeons. They're minimally invasive gynecologists or reproductive endocrinologists who do specialized endometriosis surgery. And oftentimes women can't access them because their insurance will not cover those subspecialists. So it's another massive problem where we need to talk about it. We need to advocate and do what we can to raise awareness to show that this is so common. 1 in 10 women, it's just as common as diabetes, and yet we're not getting insurance to cover treatments. It's wild.
We have a caller now. Sarah Lackney is calling in. Sarah recently had a hysterectomy because of uterine fibroids. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Thanks for calling in. Sarah, I want to ask you, when did you first learn that you had uterine fibroids? What can you tell us about that and what it was like living with them?
Yeah, growing up, I had quote unquote normal periods, but in 2018, things certainly changed. I started getting severe cramping where I couldn't even stand up straight, excess bleeding, dry heaving. I started to miss work trips. And so after a few months of living like that, I went to my gynecologist and had an ultrasound, and that's the first time I heard the word fibroids. And I was told, fibroids are pretty common, so it's not about the fibroids, it's about the location. And mine were located in a spot on my uterus where it was likely causing the bleeding, the pain, but it was also in a spot that they didn't want to do surgery due to the procedure being more complex and then the recovery. So it was more of a let's just monitor these for a while and live with it, basically.
So, Dr. Pope, let me ask you about some of the things Sarah described there about just immediately having these very severe symptoms related to these fibroids. And
Yeah.
studies show that 80% of women will develop uterine fibroids. So, is there any rhyme or reason as to who will experience things as severe as Sarah described versus who will just have fibroids and not know it?
Yeah, I mean, they are very common, but we see them even more commonly among women of color. So very, very common, up to 70, 80%, like you said, and upwards to 90% for women of color throughout their lifetime. So up to their 50s, 60s, especially when women are being diagnosed as they go through menopause and maybe had a fibroid earlier that wasn't a problem until those hormonal fluctuations start and then become a problem. So little rhyme and reason, but it just very, very common.
Okay. For anyone just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, we're talking about women's health issues related to hormonal imbalances and changes. And we have Dr. Rachel Pope with us, who is an OBGYN with University Hospitals. She's an expert in hormonal issues related to women's health. We also have patients with us who are sharing their stories. We want to thank our panel for being here. And if you have a comment or a question you want to call in with, the number to do that is 866-578-0903. And you can also email us at soi@ideastream.org. Now, Sarah, with your experience, you did see multiple doctors, and there were options sort of discussed in terms of treatment leading up to you eventually having a hysterectomy. Can you tell me about those experiences and what was told to you when you went and saw doctors about this issue?
Yeah, in 2018, I've never been on birth control, and it was suggested that I could try birth control to help balance the hormones. I did not do that. I kind of just lived with it, and it would go in cycles, 3 months of severe pain and then like a month or two of relief. But then in 2023, I had moved to Chicago, and I could tell the pain got worse, the dry heaving, I was sweating. I felt like I was basically going crazy, but also my stomach started to expand, and I could actually feel the fibroid. So I went in for another ultrasound, and again, I was told, you do have these fibroids. They're in this location where we want to avoid doing surgery, but you also have this one that's kind of growing on a stalk. And then they also discovered I had polyps. And we did a polyp removal because that was the easier procedure to see if that would help with symptoms. And it did not. And so I ended up moving again, a little bit of a gypsy. And I got another ultrasound, and I was told, that one on the stalk has doubled in size. We think you need a hysterectomy based on all of these fibroids and this one that's growing fast.
Dr. Pope, It seems like Sarah was discouraged there from having surgery to remove the fibroids themselves before leading up to the hysterectomy. Can you tell us why that might be a case for a patient?
I mean, I think that a lot of gynecologists want to give treatment for sort of the least invasive thing, something that's not going to cause as many risks or introduce potential risks before going to surgery, which we know carries many more risks. But at the same time, if Sarah was done having children, I don't know what her circumstances were there, but if she did not want to become pregnant and therefore didn't have use of her uterus anymore, I don't know why she was delayed so much from getting a hysterectomy, because clearly she had multiple fibroids, it sounds like, and polyps. I don't see why there was a delay, unless it was the situation where she was hoping to have more children, right? Because then we want to really give her as many options as she can. Otherwise, we try the least invasive option first, which might be medication like birth control pills, might be something that would suppress her ovulation, decrease the bleeding. Some things can even shrink the fibroids. But really then, if those are not working, we move towards surgery.
And when you did first see that doctor here, once you moved to the Cleveland area, Sarah, hysterectomy was recommended for you. How did you feel when that recommendation was made?
My feelings may evolve or change with time, but I felt relief. I was finally presented with a solution to the problem. I had a plan to get my life and body back after 7 years of living like this and hearing, let's just monitor these and see what happens. So it was relief.
Okay. And how are you feeling now, Sarah? So you had the surgery. This was September of 2025, and you had the surgery almost 7 months out now. How are you feeling today?
I feel great. Being on the other side now for 6 months, I don't know how that was my normal. And, when they did the surgery 2 months after that last ultrasound, it had doubled again. They said it was one of the fastest growing fibroids they've seen. It was 25 by 20 by 11 centimeters at that point, which is extremely large. And they also discovered while they were in there, I did have endometriosis too.
Wow. 25 by 20 by 11 centimeters. That's a significant size of something in your body that's not supposed to be there. That's like a small melon, Sarah. So you were able to actually feel this and see it from the outside of your body.
Yes, and I was a very active person, ran, 2 to 5 miles multiple times a week. And I would say the last 4 years, I had to stop doing that because my body just felt so heavy and sluggish. And it turns out because I had a little watermelon in me as well.
Wow.
So, yeah, I'm feeling great.
Good. We're glad to hear that. Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to call in and share your story with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Meg, let's talk about your experience. You had thyroid removal surgery not only once, but twice.
Yes.
And this was actually something that your OBGYN noticed. So tell us about how you found out about this issue.
Yeah, and listening to your story, Megan, it's funny how there's very different diagnoses, but very similar symptoms and tendencies and things. So it happened around a time in my life that was really transformative. So I had been working at a TV station in Toledo, and about 90% of our staff got laid off. So then I got a job here in Cleveland, which was my hometown. And because of that, I also went through a breakup for long distance. And there was just a lot going on in my life. Got the job here, moved back home with my parents, that I didn't even realize, I was so emotional, and I just thought I was really emotional. But it turns out a lot of that was because of these thyroid issues. So I went to my regular appointment with my OBGYN, and they do the general pat down, and she looked at me and she's like, "Have you ever had your thyroid checked?" And I was like, "No, up until then, no one had ever mentioned it. I'd never even really heard of an issue with that." And she was like, "I would definitely recommend going and getting it looked at." So I went and saw an ENT, and they were like, "Yeah."
An ENT, an ear, nose, and throat doctor?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And he was like, "Yeah, you definitely have some nodules on the side of your thyroid." So they obviously recommended surgery, and it was very unexpected, so it was definitely a little nerve-wracking, but it wasn't too difficult until we went back for the biopsy follow-up. And that was the first day of, I want to say, 2018. and they had found cancerous cells.
Oh, wow.
So they had to do the surgery again and take the rest of the thyroid out. And I think what I just want to share the most here is how common it is. And I can attest to that too, because once I had my second one, my mother's friend, who was a physical therapist, looked at her and said, "Have you ever had yours looked at?" And so the day that they did the follow-up biopsy on my second surgery, they literally whisked me out of the chair and sat my mom right down and found nodules on hers as well.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was wild.
Let me ask you, Dr. Pope, about what Meg experienced there. Her OBGYN actually alerting her to something that you wouldn't necessarily think is related to the reproductive system. Does that happen a lot?
Yeah, fairly commonly, because we do see the thyroid influence the menstrual cycle and other hormones as well. So that's something that we generally are on the lookout for. I love that your OBGYN caught that. I also love that you knew that something was going on. And I feel like that combination of having an open and honest relationship with your healthcare professional, and also having that empowerment to be able to ask questions, to be able to talk to your family about it, is so important for women.
So you have the thyroid removal surgery, you get the biopsy results, you go back, you have the second thyroid removal surgery. At any point in this process, were you ever concerned about having your thyroids removed? You know, we think they've got to be there for a reason.
Right. It was concerning because up until then, I'd never really even known that that was an issue. So yeah, you wonder. And then when they tell you, you know, you're going to have to take a pill for the rest of your life, that feels very like alarming and just kind of altering. And I told you yesterday, my mom and I went home, and I was very grateful. My mom went to every appointment with me. And when we went home after the cancer discovery, and she was like, "How do you feel about that?" I'm like, you know, I never would call myself like a cancer survivor. It was just a few small cells, and obviously they just did the most precautionary thing to remove it all. But I told her, like, that's not even what's scaring me. It's just like doing the same surgery again. And like you said, I think it just attests to like listening to your body and just being aware of these things. I think while I would never chalk it up to anything like endometriosis, it's so common but so unnoticed in a lot of women. And when I look back on photos now, I'm like, oh my God, you could totally see, like, I had an Adam's apple, and women should not have that. And I remember looking back like around that time and saying, like, yeah, why am I sticking my neck out weird in pictures? But it was not even something that really registered until the diagnosis.
So, Dr. Pope, what happens to our body? Meg has shared that she now has to take a pill every day for the rest of her life. When the thyroid is removed, what happens?
Yeah, you actually have to replace the functioning that it was doing. So the great thing is that we do have medications that can replace that functioning. When we think about other parts of our body, like our ovaries, very similar, release hormones that have key components, key functions, we can use treatments, we can use medication to replace what they're doing. So really important, but she'll have to also do lab work for the rest of her life to make sure that the medications are at the right dose and that she's not having other side effects.
So it sounds like we have a bit of a theme happening here.
Yes.
Symptoms come on instantly, it seems, and it may take time to figure out what those are. Sometimes the diagnosis can come a little more quickly when it comes with the thyroid instance here. How quickly did you feel differently after the surgeries, Meg?
Definitely pretty quickly, but they warned me that there would be a good month or two of like re-regulating my hormonal system. And I definitely felt that. I think I underestimated that. And then when I was going through it, it was just like, yeah, you know, it was easy to have things set me off. So, and that the other thing that they had found when they went through and searched me for the first surgery, I also had Hashimoto's, which is pretty typically common. Hashimoto's is sometimes what like kind of irritates the thyroid, and that is what causes like a huge hormonal imbalance. So yes, that was a huge. I mean, that whole surgery, the whole experience was a lot more than I did expect. I would never call it like, you know, like on a, you know, they say pain on a scale of 1 to 10. I don't know if I would call it a 10, but it was definitely a lot more than I expected.
Dr. Pope, what can you tell us about Hashimoto's disease?
Yeah, so actually, like autoimmune conditions, we see them pop up over time for more women than men, actually, and they can come at any point. It's interesting because, as you know, I take care of a lot of women going through perimenopause, and sometimes the symptoms are very similar. We'll find women having hot flashes, night sweats, menstrual changes, mood changes, like you mentioned. And so it's important that if you think you're going through perimenopause, you also have your thyroid evaluated.
Let's go back to, Megan, your experience with endometriosis, and you had a hysterectomy. So from there, did your symptoms alleviate? What are you experiencing now?
I had 7 amazing years after surgery. And kind of speaking to when you asked how soon after did you get relief, the next day. I actually went and saw a specialist in Atlanta, and I was in the post-op, and my mom and my husband came in. They go, "You look better just having had surgery than you did before." They go, "You have color in your face, you have light in your eye." The next day I wanted to walk like 5 miles, which I could never. It was like I had been like awakened. So my experience was that I got 7 great years, but then some symptoms started to come back. And I have my ovaries left only, but again, my body started alerting me to things that were not right. And then sure enough, I got some imaging done, and it seems as though it's back. And speaking to what Dr. Pope says, there is no cure for it. Just like anything, you can get rid of it, but these cells, they're smart. They can reproduce, they can go other places. So, there is no cure for endometriosis. Hysterectomy isn't a cure. Surgery isn't a cure. Birth control is not a cure. There simply is no cure. So you would think, well, there's not much left. Where else could it go? It can go other places, and it can come back. In my case, it did. So.
Wow. We have an email from Stephen on this point, and Stephen asks, when you say it's a full body disease, do you mean that once it's present somewhere in the body, it can spread? Dr. Pope, is that how it works? It's present and then it spreads?
So sometimes it's just actually existing in other parts that we haven't found yet or we haven't thought of. So, Megan mentioned thoracic or lung presence of endometriosis. Well, typically, if you're being seen by a gynecologist for painful periods, we're not looking in the lungs right away, and we're not doing a full body scan necessarily. And even speaking of scans, they are pretty good. Our MRIs are pretty good for locating endometriosis, but they're not 100%. So it could be present elsewhere. We do see endometriosis recur. We see it pop up in other places, but again, it may have already been there.
And we covered this a little bit, but I want to be clear here. So with your hysterectomy, Megan, your ovaries remained. Dr. Pope, what is the reason for the ovaries remaining in a situation like this?
We do our best to keep ovaries for as long as possible. We know how important that estrogen and progesterone coming from the ovaries and testosterone as well are for the entire body, the bones, heart, brain. And again, like I mentioned with perimenopause and menopause, we see how women start to feel when they have those hormones changed or altered, even naturally. So to have them abruptly taken away is extremely life-altering. And we see actually an increase of all-cause mortality when women lose their ovaries early. So we do whatever we can, whether it's endometriosis or PCOS, to preserve a woman's ovaries, unless it gets to the point where she really no longer can bear it because the endometriosis is on the ovaries or because the cycles cannot be suppressed with medications sufficiently.
As we wrap up this conversation, Dr. Pope, I'll ask you, are there support groups that you might recommend for people dealing with these conditions?
Yeah, there's a lot. And I bet our patient guests also could attest to this. I always joke that Facebook has kind of gone out of style for a lot of younger generations, but it's a great place for groups. I think that's one of the only places where you can find support groups and be able to join and talk to other people going through the same thing, which is so massive. We don't talk about this enough. We need to talk more openly. It's so common, right? So if you start talking about it, chances are you're going to find somebody else who's experiencing it. But at least until then, we have online options to bring people in. I always just caution people, sometimes the loudest people in those support groups can be people with the absolute worst experiences, and everyone's experience is going to be different. So even if you hear some horror stories from people in support groups, of course, support them mutually, but that might not happen to you.
That's a really important note to keep in mind. The internet can be a scary place. Yes. Megan, have there been any support systems that you've enjoyed?
I always kind of joke. I'm part of some sort of endometriosis algorithm. So if there is a TikTok reel, an Instagram reel, it's going to pop up. But the groups on Facebook, definitely a member of those, but I like watching the reels because it's a person videoing their life, chronicling it. It makes you seen, validated. It actually sometimes they add a little lighthearted humor to it, and it makes you say, "Hey, I'm going through that too." You know, you really feel like there's like a sisterhood here in people that are experiencing the same thing. So the groups are great, but again, there's a varying amount of people with different types of symptoms, different severities. But again, information's power, and I think patients experiencing the same things are sometimes our best form of knowledge, and that's kind of how I found out about a lot of the information I have.
Yeah. Thank you to everyone for sharing your experiences today. You sharing your experiences will maybe help people who are hearing something that might resonate with them, maybe ask a different question and maybe get them to a better treatment plan. So we appreciate it. Meg Gallagher, who had your thyroid removed twice. Thank you for being on the panel today. Megan Clark, an endometriosis patient, we appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
And Dr. Rachel Pope, OBGYN and Chief of Female Sexual Health with University Hospitals. Thank you, as always, for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break now. When we come back, tomorrow is opening day for the Cleveland Guardians. In this latest installment of The Menu, we're talking about new foods and classic staples at Progressive Field. A tasty segment coming your way. This is The Sound of Ideas. I'm Stephanie Haney. We'll be right back. You're with The Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you for staying with us. Tomorrow is an exciting day here in Cleveland. It's opening day for the Cleveland Guardians at Progressive Field, and fans will find more than just a new roster when they come to the ballpark. The stadium is rolling out a new lineup of food, local partnerships, and updated spaces. It's also drawing national attention, ranking 4th on USA Today's 10 Best list for baseball stadium food. Voters highlighted Cleveland favorites, from pierogi and sausages to the slider dog topped with Fruit Loops, bacon, and mac and cheese. This season also brings expanded collaborations with local spots like Good Company, Steak, Aladdin's, and Sauce the City. Concession areas are getting a refresh as well, with the Arcade Marketplace shifting to a grab-and-go format, and the former Fathead space reopening as The Landing. This is a self-checkout market and also a gathering spot. So that brings us to The Menu, which is our bi-weekly segment on Northeast Ohio's food scene that's produced in collaboration with Cleveland Magazine. So joining us for this conversation on what you can expect at the ballpark and ballpark staples in general. Today we've got Dylan Stewart, editor at Cleveland Magazine. Dylan, welcome back.
Hello, thank you.
Good to have you. We also have Julia LaCastro, Vice President of Operations and Partner at Hangry Brands. Hi, Julia.
Hello.
We want to hear all about the exciting things you have coming to the ballpark. Very excited for that. And we want to hear from you. We want to hear your favorite foods at the ballpark, or maybe something you wish would come to the ballpark. To join our conversation about opening day and all those good ballpark eats, you can give us a call at 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can send us a message on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. So, Julia, you're with Hangry Brands, which steak is a part of that, and steak is coming to Progressive Field for the first time. So tell us, what will be on the menu at the ballpark?
So our stand is going to be called Stake Me Out to the Ball Game. Kind of a fun
Love.
little play on that.
Love.
We are offering a couple of classics that you're going to get in the restaurant. So we're going to have our beef tallow steak seasoned popcorn available, as well as our carnival crab cakes, which, opening day is on Good Friday, so I'm anticipating a lot of carnival crab cakes being sold. They're a crab cake that is shaped like a corn dog, so it's got the corn dog batter on the outside, but instead of a hot dog, it's a crab cake. Okay. That's going to be served with our remoulade sauce. And then a couple of newcomers to the menu we're offering a steak sandwich. So in the restaurant, you can get a entree that's called the Baller Cut, and it's a certified Angus beef prime New York strip steak. That's going to be turned into a sandwich for the ballpark. The sandwich has the New York strip with provolone cheese, chimichurri, our money sauce, which is kind of like a zesty horseradishy sauce, and then crispy onion straws on top. So you get this like a nice 4-ounce cut of New York strip, just full strip in a sandwich. It's not like sliced up or shaved like you see at other places. And you'll still get this like nice big bite of steak in the steak sandwich. We're also serving little steak bites that come in a Guardian's ball cap, and that comes dressed in our house-made cowboy butter. And then we also have a Moscow Mule So it's a kind of, we have, if you come into the restaurant, we have a cocktail that's called I Literally Can't. That's one of our best sellers. So this is kind of a fun play for the Guardians. It comes in a slider cup and it has a little bit of rock candy and it's like a watermelon Moscow Mule.
Oh, okay. I don't even eat meat, and I don't know if anyone heard that, but my stomach is growling after hearing those descriptions. It felt very loud to me. All right, Julia, where can people find the Stake Me Out to the Ball Game stand?
We are on the first level concourse, right? Like if you're looking at home plate, we're on the third base side.
Okay, so around section 159, from what I
Yes.
understand. Okay. All right, let's bring in Rochelle Murphy now. Rochelle is culinary director at Seasoned Brands, and she's going to tell us about Aladdin's Med Dog, which fans can find at the Terrace Hub Beer Hall. Hi, Rochelle. Welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Good, good. How are you? Happy to have you here to hear about the Mediterranean food. Tell us about the kofta dog. What's on it?
Yeah, so we're so excited to bring something totally different to the ballpark this season, like introducing a Mediterranean twist on a classic hot dog. So we are featuring our Aladdin's kofta with that, and it's seasoned ground beef with parsley, spices, everything you could ever imagine. It's so good. We also serve that with hummus and our salada and our signature hot sauce. If you've ever had Aladdin's before, you know the hot sauce is our OG go-to. Everybody loves it. So we were super excited to include that in this offering.
What inspired this particular take on this and taking it to the ballpark, Rochelle?
So baseball is all about tradition, but fans today are looking for something new. And we felt that this would be a fun twist on that classic hot dog style, but especially with how much Mediterranean food is like in the news and everybody is like looking at it nowadays, we wanted to kind of bring that to an approachable aspect of the ballpark and for people to have it. It's a quick go-to, it's handheld, it's fast, it's satisfying. It's everything you want during a Cleveland Guardians, game. So we're really excited to introduce that.
And does Aladdin's have a stand at the ballpark? Where can people get this?
So we currently do not have a stand. You will be able to get it at the Beer Hall Terrace Club located on level 4 in the left field. And you can, go try a kofta dog there.
All right, Rochelle, thank you very much for sharing that with us. We appreciate it. Thanks for calling into the Sound of Ideas.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Sure. All right, Dylan, Progressive Field is rolling out several different new food options this season. So what are some of the other things? You were at the Progressive Preview Day. Tell us what you saw there.
Yeah, so the offerings from Steak and Aladdin's are delicious, I have to say. I was very lucky to get to try that. But there are some other great, good local options. Good Company has spicy Thai fries, which are, they're like these loaded fries. You're going to be eating them with a fork for sure. It's huge, totally like an Instagrammable dish, with sweet chili pulled pork. You've got veggies and spicy mayo on there. Absolutely delicious. And then we're also getting a spicy chicken sandwich from Sauce the City up there. And, I think the other big thing to write home about is not just the food that you're getting, but how you're getting it. I think, we've all waited in long lines, missed a couple innings waiting for a hot dog or pizza or things like that. And they're bringing all these new grab-and-go options. So there's going to be so much more accessibility, I think, to get the basics, your beer and your hot dog and your snacks and things like that. So I think that will only further the ability to access some of these great local options.
Okay. We talked about the food. Can we talk about the drinks a little bit? What's new or notable on the beverage side of things?
Well, I think, when we think about baseball, we think about beer, but I think wine is something that's coming to the ballpark in big ways. Of course, there is the new Mark West patio. Mark West is the wine partner of the Guardians. And, you can get a glass of wine for $15. You can't really find a restaurant where you're getting a glass of wine for much cheaper than that. So it's an accessible price. You're also seeing Le Cave de Vin, which is a little wine bar in Tremont for those who might not be familiar, they are having some wine selections in some of the grab and go spots. And, for me, I think there's this trend to wine becoming more casual. You're seeing it in more casual settings, and especially summer settings. I love a Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. It's got these fruity floral notes, and it's just so refreshing. And I think that is one of the huge trends of just seeing wine in places like a ballpark.
I've been known to have a Mark West St. Lucia Highlands Pinot Noir myself from time to time.
And what is steak without a little bit of wine?
That is a really great pairing when we're talking about pairings: beer and baseball, wine and baseball, steak and beer, all of these things. Dylan, Fatheads Brew Deck is getting an update. What's changing there?
So, in the right field, the corner has been such a great addition to the ballpark experience. And, I think the upper decks have been more of just a spillover space. And so, they are really expanding that with not only a beer market up there, but some interactive games. And, I think this standing room experience that Progressive Field has offered has just been a really fun way to kind of get in the ballpark, be social, enjoy the weather and stuff like that. And so I think this will only further that with some really great beer.
Let's talk about bringing a concept like Steak the Restaurant to the ballpark, Julia. Steak is a kind of, a fancy place. It's a nice place to be in. And does that translate to the ballpark? How did you make the decision to bring that into the ballpark? What did that look like?
It wasn't without its trials, for sure. I mean, we're talking about bringing like high quality steak into a really fast casual environment. We definitely toyed around with a lot of different cuts of steak and ended up eventually going with the one that we serve in the restaurant because it's the best version of itself. We worked really closely with Delaware North, the company that does the sports services at Progressive Field, and they've been a fantastic partner in all of this. So making sure that like our product is translating to the ballpark and translating to that concession stand, type of service has been challenging. But I think where we've gotten, I'm super proud of the product that we're putting out, and I'm really excited for people to try it.
You want to talk about having range, though. Also offering pizza
Yeah.
at the Terrace Hall. So tell us about that. The Terrace Hub, excuse me.
Yeah, so down the street in the Gateway District, we have the Slice Shop as well. And we're going to be using the same pizzas that we serve in the Slice Shop are going to be making their way over to the Terrace Hall where that Med Dog is going to be served as well. So we've got cheese, pepperoni by the slice. You can also get our garlic pillows that are tossed in Parmesan, parsley, and then served in that same souvenir cup, which is really fun. And then if you're with a group or your whole family, you can order a whole home plate pizza as well. So it's a pizza cut into squares shaped like home plate, which is fun and a little on the nose, but that's okay.
Right. We love that. I mean, plate. It was sitting right there for you.
You're right.
The pun. You had to go for it. Okay, Dylan, it can be expensive to get to the ballpark. There are packages and deals available, though. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I think first of all, I mentioned that standing room only experience, and they're still offering district tickets. It has been upped a little bit to $20, but you get a free beer with it, and you get to just sort of move around, and that's a great way to get into the ballpark. As far as food goes, there is a $30 kind of markup that you can get on your ticket that gives you bottomless bites. And so these are some of those ballpark staples, your hot dogs and chips and things like that. And, I think, again, for the family, that's a really great option. That's going to be in your upper levels of the stadium where you can get that. But, I think I have a cousin who every game he's bringing in whole pizzas and burrito bowls from Chipotle and things like that. And I think it's important to remember that you can bring your own food and water to the game. And, you have a family of 4, you got to buy the tickets, everyone wants ice cream and food. And I think it's important to remember that that's a really affordable way to get through the door. And I think, Progressive Field has done a great job of trying to make this an accessible, family-friendly experience when so many other professional sports are really inaccessible for a whole family. So don't forget you can bring in your own food too.
Very good reminder. All right, we always wrap up every segment of the menu by asking, what are you eating this weekend? Doesn't have to be at the ballpark, but if you're going, you could tell us that. Dylan, we'll start with you. What are you eating this weekend?
Well, if I could get to the ballpark, I'm going to get that Med Dog, from Aladdin's. It's we stockpile hummus and hot sauce every single time we go to Aladdin. So I'm really excited about that. And don't worry, I'll grab some steak too. So that'll round it out for me.
Thank you.
And what about you, Julia? What are you eating this weekend?
I'll be honest, I'm also excited excited about the Med Dog. I've heard really good things about it. It looks delicious, and Aladdin's makes great food. I'm gonna be munching on that steak seasoned popcorn all game long for sure.
A lot of good options. One more question. Fill in the blank on this, Dylan. Lots of new stuff. Classics are important. It's not a Guardians game without.
Beer and a hot dog. My wife's getting nachos. My 3-year-old has to have ice cream. Especially if we want to make it through a couple of innings on a hot day. But I'm a simple man. I need a beer and a hot dog.
Okay. Julia?
I'm on the Sun Cruiser train these days, so I'll take a Sun Cruiser and a home run from Jose Ramirez.
Yes, there
that
we
count for the
go.
menu?
Yeah, that's
Come on,
right.
Josie.
Let's put that on the menu. All right, I want to thank our guests for being here with us. Julia LaCastro, Vice President of Operations and partner with Hangry Brands. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And Dylan Stewart, as always, editor of Cleveland Magazine. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
That'll wrap up the show for today. If you missed any part of today's show, you can listen to the Sound of Ideas podcast or watch the show on the IdeaStream Public Media YouTube page. You can also hear a rebroadcast tonight at 9 on 89.7 WKSU. To get the last word on today's topics, you can email us at soi@ideastream.org or find us on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. Yesterday, we talked about voter registration guidelines ahead of the May 5th primary election and potential changes to the process we may see. That's if the Save America Act does prove to be passed in the law, which is still on the table at the moment. Claudia from Kent wrote in, back in the day, all you needed was a utility bill, talking about to vote. So back then, it was more important where you resided rather than proving your citizenship. Thank you for your thoughts, Claudia. We appreciate it. Now, tomorrow on The Sound of Ideas, it's the Friday Reporters Roundtable. That's with Mike McIntyre. This week, he's joined by Gabriel Kramer and Glenn Forbes, and also Karen Kassler from the State House News Bureau in Columbus. Everyone will be in studio this week. Monday, we'll bring you a conversation about women in Northeast Ohio who are leading the way when it comes to artificial intelligence innovation. This was recently held at the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you for keeping the conversation going. Everyone have a great weekend. I'll see you again on Monday, hopefully after some big Guardians wins this weekend. Go Guards!